The American Civil War, a whirlwind of tragedy and valor, brought forth leaders from the flames of conflict. Some sought peace, while others, like John Bell Hood, became symbols of unwavering resolve, even in the face of insurmountable odds. His name, forever bound to the Confederacy, echoes through history, a testament to a man shaped by war's unforgiving crucible. Hood's journey, a tapestry woven with threads of triumph and despair, takes us from the serene landscapes of Kentucky to the blood-soaked battlefields of the Civil War. He was a man of contradictions, a fearless warrior haunted by loss, a devoted leader prone to reckless charges. Today, we delve into the life of this enigmatic figure, exploring the experiences that forged his unyielding spirit and the choices that sealed his fate. Join us as we unravel the complexities of John Bell Hood, a man who, for better or worse, left an indelible mark on the annals of American history. John Bell Hood, synonymous with Southern defiance, was born on June 1, 1831, in Owensville, Kentucky. Born into a family rooted in the South, Hood inherited a legacy of honor and courage. His father, Dr. John W. Hood, instilled values of integrity and discipline. The Hood family held a prominent position in Kentucky society. Their home, surrounded by farmland, fostered John's sense of belonging. He was exposed to politics and North-South tensions early on. His mother, Theodosia, instilled loyalty and compassion in him. These traits would serve him well on the battlefields of a divided nation. John Bell Hood's childhood was a blend of idyllic Southern charm and the rigorous demands of tradition. Growing up on his family's plantation, Walnut Grove, he enjoyed the freedom and adventure of rural life. He rode horses, explored the woods, and developed a deep connection to the land. His father ensured he received a well-rounded education, initially tutored at home. Later, he attended local private schools, excelling in his studies. John displayed leadership, charisma, and loyalty. The issue of slavery cast a long shadow over his upbringing. John Bell Hood came of age as the nation neared disunion. As John Bell Hood approached manhood, the question of his future weighed heavily on his mind. John felt drawn to a career in the military. His family supported his ambition to attend West Point. In 1849, he was accepted to the prestigious academy. John was determined to prove himself worthy of the opportunity. He bid farewell to his family and embarked on a journey that would shape his destiny. The transition from the genteel life of a Kentucky gentleman to the rigors of West Point was jarring for John Bell Hood. The academy, perched high above the Hudson River, was governed by strict rules and a relentless pursuit of excellence. The days were long and arduous, filled with military drills and academic studies. Hood initially struggled to adapt to this new environment. The strict discipline and constant scrutiny tested his patience. Yet Hood possessed a steely determination and an unwavering commitment to succeed. He embraced the challenges, excelling in military training and earning respect. Hood matured into a disciplined and confident young officer. Upon graduating from West Point in 1853, John Bell Hood received his commission as a brevet second lieutenant in the United States Army. His first assignment, a fitting one for a young officer eager to prove himself, took him to the untamed wilderness of Texas. The Lone Star State, recently annexed into the Union, was a land of vast plains, rugged mountains, and a volatile mix of settlers, soldiers, and Native American tribes vying for control. For Hood, Texas represented the embodiment of adventure and opportunity. He embraced the challenges of frontier life with his characteristic zeal, quickly adapting to the rigors of campaigning in harsh and unforgiving terrain. He learned to ride with the skill of a seasoned frontiersman, mastering the art of horsemanship that would later serve him well in the cavalry. His initial duties involved patrolling the vast expanse of the Texas frontier, protecting settlers from Native American raids, and enforcing the often tenuous peace between rival factions. It was a dangerous and demanding assignment, one that tested his courage, his endurance, and his ability to make split-second decisions in the face of danger. Hood's first taste of combat came in a skirmish with a band of Comanche warriors near the banks of the Devil's River. The Comanches, renowned for their equestrian skills and ferocity in battle, launched a surprise attack on Hood's small patrol. Outnumbered and outgunned, Hood rallied his men, leading a spirited defense that held the Comanches at bay until reinforcements arrived. The skirmish on the Devil's River left an indelible mark on John Bell Hood. It was his baptism by fire, solidifying his courage and ability to inspire his men. Hood developed a deep appreciation for the role of cavalry in warfare. His superiors transferred him to the 2nd United States Cavalry Regiment. Commanded by Colonel Albert Sidney Johnston, the unit was renowned for its rigorous training. Under Johnston's tutelage, Hood flourished. He mastered cavalry tactics, saber, and carbine use. Hood drilled relentlessly, honing his skills as a horseman and leader. Johnston became both a mentor and a friend. Their bond, forged in frontier service, had profound implications. Johnston would become one of the Confederacy's most respected generals. Hood, influenced by Johnston, followed him down the path of secession. Hood thrived as a cavalry officer. He participated in numerous patrols and expeditions. Hood earned a reputation as a fearless and resourceful officer. Life on the Texas frontier was a constant test of endurance and adaptability. The vast distances, the scorching heat, the scarcity of water, and the ever-present threat of Native American attacks made for a harsh and unforgiving existence. Yet, John Bell Hood embraced the challenges of frontier life, finding a strange sort of exhilaration in the face of danger. He learned to read the subtle signs of the land, to track prey, to navigate by the stars, and to survive on his wits and the meager rations provided by the army. He developed a deep respect for the Native American tribes he fought against, admiring their horsemanship, their knowledge of the land, and their tenacity in the face of encroaching white settlement. Hood's duties took him to some of the most remote and desolate corners of the West. He participated in expeditions against the Comanches, the Apaches, and the Kiowas, engaging in skirmishes and running battles across the desolate plains and rugged canyons of the frontier. He witnessed firsthand the brutality of frontier warfare, the cycle of violence and retaliation that defined the relationship between the United States Army and the Native American tribes. Despite the hardships and dangers of frontier service, Hood found time to pursue his intellectual interests. He was an avid reader, devouring books on history, philosophy, and military strategy. He maintained a regular correspondence with his family back in Kentucky, sharing his experiences and observations in detailed letters. As John Bell Hood matured into a seasoned cavalry officer, a growing sense of unease began to cloud his once unwavering loyalty to the United States Army. The issue of slavery, a simmering cauldron of tension since the nation's founding, was reaching a boiling point, casting a long shadow over the country and dividing it along sectional lines. The political climate in the United States was becoming increasingly polarized, with abolitionist sentiment gaining momentum in the North and Southern states fiercely defending the institution of slavery as integral to their way of life. Newspapers fanned the flames of discord, political debates grew more heated, and the threat of secession loomed large. Hood, a Southerner by birth and upbringing, found himself increasingly sympathetic to the Southern perspective. He had witnessed firsthand the economic dependence of the South on slave labor and had absorbed the prevailing social attitudes that viewed slavery as a necessary evil at best and a positive good at worst. While Hood personally found slavery to be a repugnant institution, he felt a strong sense of loyalty to his home state of Kentucky and to the Southern way of life. He believed that the federal government was overstepping its bounds by attempting to dictate the domestic policies of sovereign states. As the nation teetered on the brink of disunion, Hood found himself torn between his oath to the United States Army and his allegiance to the South. The escalating tensions and the growing certainty of war weighed heavily on his mind, forcing him to confront an agonizing choice that would shape his destiny. The year 1861 dawned with a sense of foreboding. The election of Abraham Lincoln, a staunch opponent of slavery, in November 1860, had pushed the Southern states to the precipice of secession. On December 20th, South Carolina took the fateful step, declaring its withdrawal from the Union. Within months, 6 more Southern states followed suit, forming the Confederate States of America. The secession of the Southern states presented John Bell Hood with a wrenching dilemma. He had sworn an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States, yet his heart lay with his home state of Kentucky and the Southern cause. He agonized over his decision, weighing his loyalty to the Union against his belief in states' rights and his ties to the South. Adding to his internal conflict was the fact that his mentor and former commander, Albert Sidney Johnston, had resigned his commission in the U.S. Army to join the Confederacy. Johnston, now a general in the Confederate Army, urged Hood to follow his conscience and join him in the fight for Southern independence. In the end, Hood's sense of duty to his home state and his belief in the Southern cause outweighed his obligations to the Union. In April 1861, John Bell Hood resigned his commission in the United States Army and offered his sword to the Confederacy. It was a decision that would have far-reaching consequences, both for Hood himself and for the course of the war. John Bell Hood's journey from a resigned U.S. Army officer to a Confederate soldier began with urgency. He traveled eastward to the battlefields of Virginia. Upon arriving in Richmond, Hood was greeted with excitement and trepidation. The city was abuzz with activity as young men joined the Confederate cause. Hood, a West Point graduate, was a valuable asset. He was commissioned as a captain and assigned to the Texas Cavalry. His first combat was at the First Battle of Bull Run. Hood led a daring charge contributing to a Confederate victory. Following the Confederate victory at Bull Run, a sense of stalemate settled over the eastern theater of the war. Both sides consolidated their positions, trained their armies, and prepared for the inevitable escalation of the conflict. For John Bell Hood, the months following Bull Run were a time of intense training and preparation. He drilled his men relentlessly, instilling in them the discipline, the skills, and the esprit de corps that would be essential for survival on the battlefields to come. In the spring of 1862, the Union Army, now under the command of Major General George B. McClellan, launched a major offensive aimed at capturing the Confederate capital of Richmond. McClellan's plan involved transporting his army by ship to the Virginia Peninsula, a narrow strip of land between the York and James Rivers, and advancing on Richmond from the southeast. The Peninsula Campaign, as it became known, was a grueling and bloody affair, marked by a series of hard-fought battles and sieges. Hood, now a lieutenant colonel, and his Texans were in the thick of the fighting, distinguishing themselves in engagements at Yorktown, Williamsburg, and Seven Pines. At the Battle of Seven Pines, fought on May 31st and June 1st, 1862, Hood's brigade, fighting with its usual ferocity, played a pivotal role in halting a Union assault. Hood, leading from the front as always, had his horse shot out from under him and was wounded in the arm. Despite his injuries, he refused to leave the field, rallying his men and continuing to fight until the Union attack was repulsed. The Peninsula Campaign, though ultimately a strategic defeat for the Confederacy, solidified John Bell Hood's reputation as a rising star in the Confederate Army. His courage under fire, his tactical acumen, and his ability to inspire his men had not gone unnoticed by his superiors. General Robert E. Lee, who had assumed command of the Army of Northern Virginia in June 1862, recognized Hood's potential and promoted him to brigadier general. Lee, impressed by Hood's performance during the 7 days battles, a series of engagements that had successfully repulsed McClellan's advance on Richmond, gave Hood command of a brigade in James Longstreet's 1st Corps. Hood's star continued to rise in the summer and fall of 1862. At the Battle of Second Manassas in late August, Hood's brigade, fighting with its trademark aggression, spearheaded a Confederate counterattack that routed a Union corps and secured a decisive Confederate victory. Hood's performance at Second Manassas earned him further accolades, including a battlefield promotion to Major General, making him, at the age of 31, one of the youngest officers in the Confederate Army to attain that rank. He had come a long way from the young cavalry officer who had first ridden into Texas more than a decade earlier. He was now a seasoned combat commander, battle-tested and blooded, with a reputation for fearlessness and a growing legend among the men who served under him. His journey, however, was far from over. The bloodiest chapters of the war and of Hood's life were yet to be written. The summer of 1862 saw John Bell Hood rise to a respected brigade commander. The true test of his mettle was yet to come. In September, General Lee embarked on his first invasion of the North. Lee's army crossed into Maryland, setting the stage for the Battle of Antietam. Antietam, fought on September 17, 1862, was a brutal slugfest. Hood's division was tasked with stemming a Union advance. Hood's Texans met the Union onslaught with a storm of lead. They fought like demons, repulsing charge after charge. Hood rallied his men, urging them forward. Despite their valor, they were outnumbered and outgunned. By midday, they were forced to withdraw, leaving the ground littered with their dead and wounded. Antietam ended in a tactical draw, dashing Lee's hopes for a decisive victory. The spring of 1863 found the Confederacy, despite its victories on Virginia soil, facing a growing strategic crisis. Union forces, emboldened by recent successes in the Western theater, tightened their grip on the Confederacy's vital supply lines. General Lee, recognizing the need for a decisive victory, gambled on a second invasion of the North, hoping to strike a blow at the heart of the Union and force a negotiated peace. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, with Hood's Texans at its core, crossed the Potomac River in June, marching north into Pennsylvania. Their objective, the bustling town of Gettysburg, a strategic crossroads that lay astride vital rail lines. The fate of the Confederacy, it seemed, hung in the balance. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought over 3 long and bloody days in early July 1863, would prove to be the turning point of the war. On the second day of the battle, July 2nd, Hood's division, now part of Longstreet's attack on the Union left flank, was ordered to assault a heavily fortified position known as Little Round Top. Hood, despite his reservations about the tactical soundness of the attack, led his men forward with his usual courage. The Texans charged up the rocky slopes of Little Round Top, facing a withering hail of rifle and artillery fire. They fought their way to the summit, engaging in hand-to-hand combat with the defending Union troops. Gettysburg, a Confederate defeat of staggering proportions, left John Bell Hood physically and emotionally scarred. The loss of so many of his beloved Texans, men he had led into battle time and again, weighed heavily on his soul. Yet the relentless pace of war allowed for little time to grieve. The Confederacy, its back against the wall, needed its best commanders, wounded or not, to stem the tide of Union advances. In September 1863, just 3 months after Gettysburg, Hood, still recovering from his wounds, rejoined the Army of Tennessee, now under the command of General Braxton Bragg in northern Georgia. The Army of Tennessee, tasked with halting a major Union advance on the vital rail center of Chattanooga, was preparing for a major engagement near the Chickamauga Creek. The Battle of Chickamauga, fought on September 19th and 20th, 1863, was a Confederate victory, a much-needed morale boost for the South. Hood, despite his injuries, played a critical role in the battle. Leading his division with his usual aggression, he exploited a gap in the Union lines, throwing the Federal forces into disarray. During the heat of the battle, Hood's horse was shot out from under him and he was again wounded, this time in the leg. Yet true to form, he refused to leave the field, continuing to direct his troops from a stretcher until victory was secured. The victory at Chickamauga, though costly, reinvigorated the Confederate cause in the West. John Bell Hood, hailed for his courage and leadership, seemed destined for even greater glory. Yet fate, as it often does in wartime, had other plans. Hood's wounds, particularly the one to his leg, proved to be far more serious than initially believed. Infection set in, and despite the best efforts of Confederate surgeons, Hood's condition deteriorated rapidly. Gangrene, a constant threat in the days before antibiotics, spread through his leg, necessitating drastic measures. On September 20th, 1863, the day after the Confederate victory at Chickamauga, Hood underwent an amputation of his right leg above the knee. The surgery, performed without the benefit of anesthesia, was a harrowing ordeal. Hood, known for his stoicism, endured the procedure with remarkable fortitude. Yet the loss of his leg, at the age of 32, was a devastating blow, both physically and emotionally. It marked the end of his days as a frontline combat commander, a role he had embraced with such passion and skill. Yet Hood's spirit, though diminished, was far from broken. Determined to continue serving the Confederacy in any way he could, he embarked on a grueling regimen of physical therapy, learning to walk again with the aid of a crutch and a prosthetic leg. John Bell Hood's recovery from the amputation of his leg was a testament to his indomitable spirit and his unwavering dedication to the Confederate cause. Months of painful rehabilitation and the constant specter of phantom pains did little to dampen his ardor for the fight. By the spring of 1864, Hood, fitted with a prosthetic leg and walking with the aid of a cane, was back in the saddle, eager to resume his role in the defense of the Confederacy. His opportunity came in the form of a new command, but it was a command fraught with peril, a poisoned chalice that few other Confederate officers would have dared to accept. In July 1864, with the Western Theater in a state of crisis, Confederate President Jefferson Davis summoned Hood to Richmond. Davis, desperate for a decisive leader to revitalize the faltering Army of Tennessee, offered Hood the command. The Army of Tennessee, once a proud and formidable force, had been battered and demoralized by a string of defeats at the hands of Union General William T. Sherman. Its morale was low, its ranks depleted, and its supply lines stretched thin. Accepting command of the Army of Tennessee was tantamount to accepting a suicide mission. Yet Hood, ever the gambler, ever the believer in bold action, did not hesitate. He accepted the command, vowing to restore the Army's fighting spirit and drive Sherman's forces from Georgia. It was a promise he would keep at a terrible cost. John Bell Hood assumed command of the Army of Tennessee on July 18, 1864, inheriting a command in disarray, facing an enemy superior in numbers and resources. General William T. Sherman's Union forces were at the gates of Atlanta, the Confederacy's industrial heartland, poised to deliver a potentially fatal blow to the Southern war effort. Hood, undeterred by the daunting odds, immediately set about trying to rally his battered army and regain the initiative. What followed was a grueling 6-week campaign of maneuver and attrition, a clash of wills between two master tacticians. Hood, true to his aggressive nature, launched a series of attacks on Sherman's advancing columns, hoping to find a weakness to exploit. The battles around Atlanta, Peachtree Creek, Atlanta, Ezra Church, were some of the war's most savage. Hood's men, inspired by their new commander's fighting spirit, fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Yet Sherman, a master of logistics and maneuver, proved to be a wily and relentless opponent. He parried Hood's attacks, inflicted heavy casualties, and continued his inexorable advance on Atlanta. Hood's aggressive tactics, while costing Sherman dearly, also depleted his own dwindling manpower. By late August, with Atlanta surrounded and under constant bombardment, Hood knew that the game was up. He had no choice but to abandon the city, a strategic setback of immense proportions for the Confederacy. The fall of Atlanta on September 2, 1864, was a devastating blow to the Confederacy. John Bell Hood, though cleared of any blame, knew his reputation and the fate of the Confederacy hung in the balance. With Sherman's forces occupying Atlanta, Hood made a fateful decision to invade Tennessee. His goal to cut Sherman's supply lines and force him to abandon Georgia. It was a bold plan, full of risk, but for Hood, it was the only plan left. John Bell Hood's invasion of Tennessee began with hope, aiming to wrest the initiative from the Union. His initial objective, Nashville, a vital supply depot for Union forces. The campaign quickly bogged down due to logistical nightmares and stubborn Union resistance. Despite hardships, Hood pressed on, hoping to force a decisive engagement with Union forces. On November 30th, 1864, Hood's army engaged Schofield's forces at Franklin, Tennessee, resulting in a disaster for the Confederacy. The Battle of Franklin left Hood's army shattered and demoralized. Yet Hood refused to concede defeat and continued his advance on Nashville. The Battle of Nashville, fought on December 15th and 16th, 1864, proved to be the death knell of the Confederacy in the West. Outnumbered and outgunned, Hood's army was routed by Thomas's forces. The defeat at Nashville was a crushing blow, not only for the Confederacy but also for Hood's reputation. The aftermath of the Battle of Nashville was chaotic for the Confederacy. Hood, his army shattered, requested to be relieved of his command on December 23, 1864. His request was granted, marking the end of his military career. Despite his fall from grace, Hood remained defiant, blaming the Confederacy's defeat on the North's overwhelming industrial might. In January 1865, Hood traveled to Mississippi, hoping to raise a new army, but his efforts proved futile. As the spring of 1865 dawned, the Confederacy's fate hung by a thread. John Bell Hood, his dreams of Confederate victory dashed, watched the Confederacy's demise with a heavy heart. On May 31, 1865, Hood surrendered to Union forces at Natchez, Mississippi. The surrender marked the official end of the Confederacy and the beginning of a long process of reconciliation. For Hood, the surrender marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. The spring of 1865 found John Bell Hood a man adrift. The Confederacy lay in ruins, its dreams of independence dashed. Returning to Kentucky, Hood found a land struggling to come to terms with the war's devastation. For Hood, the defeat was particularly bitter. He had lost a leg, his health was shattered, and his reputation tarnished. He was a soldier without an army, a general without a command, adrift in a world struggling to redefine itself. The years following the war were a time of transition for John Bell Hood. Unable to return to his pre-war life, he sought solace in New Orleans. He arrived in the city in 1866, determined to rebuild his life. Hood found work as a cotton broker, leveraging his knowledge of Southern agriculture. The cotton trade was volatile, but Hood approached it with determination. He worked tirelessly, navigating the complexities of the post-war cotton market. While John Bell Hood found a measure of success in the business world, his personal life was marked by both joy and profound sorrow. In 1866, shortly after their arrival in New Orleans, Anna Marie gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Lydia. Over the next few years, the Hood family grew with the arrival of 3 more children, John Bell Jr., Sinks, and another daughter, also named Anna Marie. Hood, despite the demands of his work and the challenges of adapting to civilian life, was a devoted husband and father. He doted on his children, finding solace and joy in their laughter and their youthful innocence, a stark contrast to the horrors he had witnessed on the battlefields. However, fate, it seemed, was determined to test Hood's resilience once again. In 1868, tragedy struck the Hood family with devastating force. Anna Marie, weakened by childbirth and the lingering effects of a difficult pregnancy, succumbed to illness, leaving Hood a widower with 4 young children to care for. The loss of Anna Marie was a crushing blow, one that plunged Hood into a deep depression. He had lost the woman he loved, the mother of his children, the one constant in his life amidst the turmoil of war and its aftermath. He retreated into himself, seeking solace in his work and his memories, his once indomitable spirit seemingly broken. The death of his wife, Anna Marie, left John Bell Hood reeling, his world once again plunged into darkness. He was now a single father, responsible for 4 young children, their ages ranging from infancy to barely old enough to understand the loss they had suffered. Yet, amidst his grief and the daunting challenges of raising a family alone, Hood found a wellspring of strength and determination. He threw himself into the role of fatherhood with the same ferocity he had once displayed on the battlefield, his love for his children a beacon in the darkness. He hired a governess, Emma Sansom, to help care for the children, but he remained deeply involved in their upbringing, instilling in them the values of honor, duty, and perseverance that had shaped his own life. Life in New Orleans, though challenging for a single parent, provided Hood with a support system of sorts. He found solace in the company of other former Confederates, men who understood the depths of his loss and the challenges of navigating life in the defeated South. He also found comfort in the warmth and hospitality of New Orleans society, which, despite its own wartime hardships, embraced Hood and his family with open arms. Hood, determined to provide his children with a stable and loving home, purchased a modest house in a respectable neighborhood. He filled the house with laughter and music, striving to create a sense of normalcy for his children amidst the turmoil of their young lives. He often took them on outings to the park, to the theater, and to the bustling French market, exposing them to the vibrancy and diversity of New Orleans culture. Life in the post-war South was a daily struggle for John Bell Hood and countless others who had fought for the Confederacy. The Southern economy lay in ruins, its plantations decimated, its infrastructure shattered, its workforce dislocated. The abolition of slavery, while a moral imperative, had created an economic void that proved difficult to fill. Hood, like many former Confederate officers, found that his military skills and experience were ill-suited to the demands of the post-war world. The cotton trade, while initially promising, proved to be a fickle mistress, subject to the vagaries of weather, international markets, and the machinations of unscrupulous speculators. Determined to provide for his family, Hood explored various business ventures, seeking a path to financial security that seemed to elude him at every turn. He invested in a cotton plantation, hoping to capitalize on his knowledge of agriculture, but his efforts were hampered by labor shortages, inadequate capital, and the unfamiliarity of managing a workforce no longer bound by the institution of slavery. He dabbled in real estate, lured by the promise of quick profits in a city rebuilding after the war, but his investments often soured, leaving him with mounting debts and a growing sense of frustration. He tried his hand at politics, hoping to use his wartime fame and his connections within the Democratic Party to secure a government position, but his efforts were met with resistance from both former Confederates, who viewed him as a symbol of defeat, and Northerners, who distrusted his commitment to the principles of union and reconciliation. By the early 1870s, John Bell Hood found himself at a crossroads once again. His efforts to rebuild his life and secure financial stability met with repeated setbacks. The cotton trade, his initial foray into the post-war economy, had proven to be a costly miscalculation, leaving him with mounting debts and a dwindling sense of hope. Desperate for a solution, a way to provide for his growing family and salvage what remained of his reputation, Hood decided to take a gamble on a new venture, the insurance business. He saw an opportunity in the growing demand for insurance in a city still recovering from the war, its infrastructure fragile, its economy uncertain, its residents all too aware of the vagaries of fate. In 1872, Hood joined forces with a group of investors, many of them former Confederates, to form the Life Association of America, a life insurance company headquartered in New Orleans. Hood, with his name recognition and his reputation for honesty and integrity, was appointed president of the company, tasked with building its clientele and overseeing its operations. He approached his new role with characteristic zeal, drawing upon his organizational skills, his persuasive personality, and his network of contacts to promote the company and attract investors. He traveled extensively throughout the South, speaking at public gatherings, meeting with potential clients, and extolling the virtues of life insurance as a means of protecting one's family and securing their financial future. John Bell Hood's insurance business showed promise. The Life Association of America thrived under his leadership. Yet the shadows of the past haunted him. War scars lingered, both physical and emotional. Hood's amputated leg required laudanum for pain. Memories of lost battles and men weighed heavily. In 1879, yellow fever struck New Orleans. The epidemic left death and despair. Hood worked tirelessly to help the sick. Fate was cruel. Hood's wife and daughter died in August 1879. The loss was a blow from which Hood never recovered. The deaths of his wife, Mary Elizabeth, and his daughter, Lydia, in the summer of 1879, broke John Bell Hood's spirit. Already in frail health, his body ravaged by war wounds and chronic pain, he seemed to age decades in days. The fight drained from him, leaving a shell of the man who had once led armies. He retreated into memories, the love of his children, and opiates. His insurance business faltered without his leadership. On August 30th, 1879, John Bell Hood died in New Orleans, surrounded by his children. He was 48 years old. The cause of death was listed as yellow fever, but many believed he died of a broken heart. His death was met with grief from across the South. Newspapers recounted his battlefield exploits and personal tragedies. He was laid to rest in Metairie Cemetery in New Orleans. His grave became a place of pilgrimage for veterans, a testament to the enduring power of the Civil War. John Bell Hood's passing marked the end of a life lived in the heart of a storm. His legacy, however, proved to be as complex and contradictory as the man himself. In the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, his reputation, particularly in the South, was a subject of much debate, often mirroring the deep divisions that the war had wrought. Some, particularly within the defeated Confederacy, viewed Hood as a scapegoat, his name unfairly tarnished by the losses at Franklin and Nashville. They pointed to his earlier battlefield successes, his undeniable courage, and his unwavering devotion to the Southern cause as evidence of his merits as a commander. To them, Hood was a victim of circumstance, overwhelmed by superior Union forces and betrayed by the dwindling fortunes of the Confederacy. Others, however, were less forgiving. They saw Hood's aggressive tactics and his penchant for risky maneuvers as reckless and ultimately detrimental to the Confederate war effort. The devastating casualties suffered by his troops at Franklin and Nashville, they argued, were the result of poor judgment and a stubborn refusal to adapt to changing circumstances. His critics, while acknowledging his bravery, questioned his strategic acumen and his ability to learn from his mistakes. This initial period of polarized opinions, of accusations leveled and defenses mounted, reflected the raw emotions and the unsettled historical narratives that characterized the post-Civil War South. Hood, both in life and in death, became a lightning rod for debates about the Confederacy's downfall, the qualities of its leaders, and the enduring legacy of the lost cause. John Bell Hood's legacy remains a subject of debate, his place in the pantheon of Civil War generals a matter of ongoing discussion. Was he a brilliant tactician or a reckless gambler? The answer is rarely clear-cut. Hood's supporters point to his early successes and charisma. His detractors focus on the disastrous consequences of his leadership. The battles of Franklin and Nashville stand as stark reminders. These questions continue to be debated by historians and enthusiasts. John Bell Hood was also a husband, a father, and a man grappling with the challenges of life in a defeated South. He displayed love, devotion, and resilience beyond the battlefield. Hood's personal life was marked by joy and profound sorrow. He fathered 11 children and found solace in family life. The deaths of his wife and several children tested his spirit. Hood turned to writing to provide for his family and defend his actions. His memoir, Advance and Retreat, offers a first-hand account of his Civil War experiences. It reveals a man of contradictions, shaped by his time and war's brutal realities. If you would like to read this memoir for yourself, you can absolutely do so by clicking on the link in the description of this video or by clicking on the pinned comment. When you do so, you will be directed to the book on Amazon, where there are many options including paperback, hardback, and Kindle. When you do so, we do receive a small commission which helps this channel stay on YouTube. The weight of history, for those who lived through its tumult and for those who study it from a distance, can be a heavy burden to bear. John Bell Hood, a man who walked a path carved through the fires of the Civil War, carries such a weight, his name etched in the collective memory of a nation forever marked by that conflict. To reduce him to simple labels, to declare him hero or villain, strategist or butcher, would be to ignore the intricate tapestry of his life. Hood's legacy is not one easily summed up in a single sentence, a single battlefield victory, or a single tragic defeat. It is a legacy woven from threads of bravery and blunder, of unwavering conviction and devastating loss, of a spirit forged in the fires of an unyielding devotion to a cause that ultimately met its demise. We remember him not just for the battles he fought, but for the choices he made, choices born from a time when the very soul of a nation hung in the balance. We remember him for the men he led, for the sacrifices they made under his command, for the enduring bonds of brotherhood forged in the crucible of war. And we remember him for the personal tragedies that shadowed his life, for the love he held for his family, and for the resilience he displayed in the face of overwhelming loss.